3 killers who admitted the truth before dying. In what is unquestionably the vast majority of murder cases, the guilty party is apprehended and prosecuted. Of course, this does not restore the life that they took, but it also gives the victim's relatives a feeling of closure. What about those who do succeed in getting away with murder, though? The stories that follow are about 3 immensely nasty people who managed to get away with murder and hid their crimes until they were about to perish. One victim was an innocent youngster who was abused without cause, while another was just because of being in the incorrect location at the wrong time. Welcome back to yet another episode of Just Scary. In this video, we will go over the 3 killers who admitted the truth before dying. But before we move on, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit the bell icon to stay updated. Let's check it out. Number 1. Geraldine Kelly. Simply put, Geraldine Kelly, sometimes known as Jerry, was not your typical woman in the early 1990s. She had dark hair and was fairly petite, but she also had numerous tattoos, kept attack dogs as pets, and occasionally was seen with a huge boa constrictor around her neck. She was obviously not the kind of person who should be trifled with. But what in her past may have influenced her in this way? When they were both young, Geraldine and John Kelly had their first date. They later got married and had a son and a daughter as their kids. Even though their marriage may have started out well, things started to go south in 1981. It is unclear exactly how John got into a confrontation with some of the other wedding attendees one fateful evening, but he had been drinking too much and was at a wedding at the time. His sister-in-law was killed in the altercation. John dreaded the possibility of being accused of murder. He made the decision to uproot his family and relocate across the country as a result. He found employment working at a motel after they relocated to California. However, he continued to use large amounts of alcohol at this time, and he and Geraldine frequently quarreled. John was apparently quite violent towards her for many years, forcing her to grow cold-hearted towards him, eventually leading to their 2 children moving away and distancing themselves from them. It got to the point that she couldn't take it anymore, so she made the decision to exact revenge on her husband. She fatally shot him and put his body in a freezer, where it stayed for more than 6 years. In fact, no one was at all aware of what she had done to John, not even the police or Jerry's own family. She lied to her children for a long time, telling them that their father had just perished in a vehicle accident, and that they had no reason to disbelieve this. She lied to them for a reason after all. Jerry would not decide to reveal what she had done until roughly 6 years later, when she was already terminally ill with breast cancer. She briefed her daughter on the specifics of her husband's murder, knowing that she would quickly alert the appropriate authorities. Police went to the freezer Jerry had mentioned to check it out, and sure enough, they found her ex-husband there, but he was found to be extremely decomposed. His physique was quickly recognized thanks to his highly distinctive tattoos. It was now too late for her to bring justice to her husband's murder, because Jerry had already died. Number 2. Christopher Smith. It was thought that 26-year-old Joan Harrison, who was found brutally killed in Preston, England in 1975, was a victim of the infamous Yorkshire Ripper. In that neighborhood, the Ripper was known to target prostitutes, and Joan Harrison was one of his victims, according to a letter from Wareside Jack. Peter Sutcliffe, the genuine Yorkshire Ripper, admitted to 13 killings after being apprehended in 1981, but Harrison was not one of them. Wareside Jack's letters and cassette recordings were forgeries. But at this point, the line of inquiry into Joan Harrison's murder had dried up. Then, dying of cancer, Christopher Smith made the decision to atone for his sins. Smith's DNA was obtained shortly after his arrest on suspicion of drunk driving. He may have written down his confession and left it in his home to be found after his passing out of worry that the truth would come out in the threat of his impending death. When his DNA results came back a few days later and revealed the connection to Joan Harrison's death, detectives investigated the property and came across his rambling, 3-page letter of confession and repentance. However, Christopher Smith had already passed away by that point. Before we move on to the next one, make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Number 3. Russell Smaker. The year was 1975, and 20-year-old Michael Mansfield was a Lincoln College student. Despite being a hard-working student, he was unfortunately involved in some legal issues. He had been apprehended last fall while transporting stolen goods. When the stolen goods were discovered, he was caught attempting to dispose of record albums at his dorm. He received a settlement from the district attorney after he decided to show mercy. He claimed that if he just turned in the person who sold him the goods, he would drop all accusations against him. Russell Smaker, age 21, would eventually be turned in by Michael, who agreed and knew that doing so would secure his own freedom. Michael decided to return to his hometown of Rolling Meadow, Illinois after he testified against him that Christmas. The holiday was spent with his parents, and everything seemed well at first. But he would leave his house on New Year's Eve, never to be seen again. The police were at a loss as to where he had gone because there was no sign of him. It would eventually turn into a cold case as time passed. There will be another weird event next year. However, it took place this time in Lincoln, Illinois, where Michael had previously attended school. Ruth Martin, a 51-year-old resident of Lincoln, had not reported to work that morning and hadn't called anyone to let them know she wouldn't be coming, which was quite unlike her. Her coworkers ultimately decided to call her spouse Richard. Richard quickly hurried home to check on his wife, despite the fact that he was already at work. He found a gunshot and a bloodstain right there in their own garage. No evidence of his wife could be found after a thorough check of the house. No clues were pointing in the direction of any one suspect, and the police had little to go on, much like in the case of Michael. In the end, they did discover Ruth's car, which had been abandoned and had extra items in the trunk. Just a few months had passed since Ruth went missing when police received a 911 call on October 9th. Gunshots could be heard in a typically calm and tranquil area. They were summoned to the residence of Jay and Robin Fry, who had just turned 25. Sadly, Robin was carrying the couple's first child. Police were looking for a potential motivation and a potential link between the murder of Ruth Martin and that of the Frys, as they were under extreme pressure to identify the perpetrator of these crimes. These people were all well regarded and had no opponents in the public eye, but ultimately they would come to understand that Ruth Martin and Jay Fry shared an odd relationship that was undoubtedly unexpected. The expected witnesses against Russell Smaker were Jay and Ruth. The whole thing began at a grocery store where Jay worked. After catching Russell stealing, Jay pursued him through the shop and out into the parking lot. Russell would eventually end up throwing the stolen goods into Ruth Martin's car in an effort to get rid of any proof. It was a steak package that was under $4 in price. Both Jay and Ruth were scheduled to give depositions accusing Russell of the incident. However, they were never given a chance to do so, since he would also take the life of Robin, who was merely in the wrong place at the wrong moment, along with their own. However, as for Michael Mansfield, who was still missing, what happened to him? Later, the police learned that Michael had also been asked to testify against Russell. But he had vanished before the police had a chance, and for a completely different purpose. They now had a definite suspect in mind for each of these 3 crimes. Soon after, Russell was detained and later found guilty of the killings. Over the years, he received 2 life sentences in prison. His cooperation was often sought by the investigators in order to learn the precise history of these slang terms, but he resisted and it wasn't until he was 56 years old and on his deathbed in 2011 that he eventually admitted to the killings, while still being unable to say where Michael Mansfield's body was. He did mention that Ruth Martin's body was buried beneath a road that was being built. Sadly, neither her corpse nor Michael's remains were ever discovered by the police. Soon after making his confessions, Russell passed away. With that, we have come to an end. If you liked this video, make sure to give us a thumbs up. Also, refer to other videos on our channel. We will meet again in the next video. Until then, stay safe.